We have seen how the government earns money. Now let us see how it spends money. I am Swapnil and this is the 6th episode of the budget analysis series. Let us start with your own spending analysis. You would be spending the bulk of your income on regular items needed for living like grocery, electricity, rent, health, child's education, so on and so forth. But apart from that, you would also be spending some money on buying a house or renovating the house, buying a jewelry or investing in fixed deposit. You would notice that the previous list of expenses is a bit different from this one. That something different part is actually the basic distinction between revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. For government, salaries, maintenance, admin costs, interest payments or subsidies are the part of revenue expenditure, while expenditure on constructing a rail line or a highway or an airport would amount to capital expenditure. In short, capital expenditure is that expense where you can create an asset which will last longer. A highway or Mumbai Metro may take years to complete, but it is an asset that will benefit people at large for years. For central government, the revenue expenditure accounts for around 80% of total expenditure. In FY22, the government spent around 38 lakh crore rupees or 38 trillion rupees, out of which 32 trillion rupees were in the form of revenue expenditure and 6 trillion were in the form of capital expenditure. Given our stage of economic development, government's task of managing expenses is pretty difficult because we need to feed poor, uplift backward regions and at the same time think about creating world-class infrastructure and better educational and healthcare facilities. So let us see how government handles this match. Around 50% of government's expenditure is committed. This is not a technical term, but you can say that half of the expenditure is actually unavoidable because they include interest expense, subsidies, salaries, pensions and police expenses. These are the kind of expenses where the government cannot say that they will not spend on these items. Then adding to that, around 15 to 20% of total expenditure is on defense. Now we have 65 to 70% of the total expenditure as unavoidable. Now the next question would be why they are unavoidable. Now out of remaining 30 to 35%, a large chunk is allocated to transport, agriculture and rural development ministries. Roughly 7 to 10% on transport, which includes rail, roadway, waterway as well as airways, and 7 to 10% goes to agriculture and rural development ministries. So now we have covered close to 80 to 90% of total expenditure. Now the remaining portion gets distributed among other ministries which are not listed above. That includes power, education, health, women and childcare, urban development, housing, MSME, so on and so forth. Now you can imagine how tough it would be for these ministers to claim a little more amount for their ministries, because the government is now left with a margin of only 10 to 20% depending on how much the amount has been allocated to the so-called main ministries mentioned before. This is the kind of maths that you should be aware of because you are the citizens of this country and you should know how the government spends its money on. There's a lot to talk about, but that's it for this episode. Keep following me for more updates on budget. Thank you.